Today we will be reviewing the skills from Unit 5 that you will see on the exam and the summative. So the first skill that you need to be able to do is to graph parabolas and state their properties. So the first question is asking you for the direction of opening. Since the a value is negative, that means that that parabola opens down. Now the vertex. The vertex is this number with the opposite sign and this number here. So that's the x-coordinate, that's the y-coordinate. So the vertex is at 3, 7. The axis of symmetry is the imaginary vertical line which goes through the vertex, and it goes through the x-coordinate of the vertex. You will need to write down its equation, and the equation of a vertical line is x equals, and it's equal to whatever the x-coordinate is equal to. The max or the min value is the y value of the vertex. So because this parabola opens down, we have a maximum value, and the maximum value would occur at 7. Lastly, the transformations. The negative makes the graph reflect over the x-axis. The 2 is the a value, and that will be a vertical stretch. By a factor of 2. The 3, remember that it looks like it's a negative 3, but it's actually a positive 3, so it's going to shift right 3 units. And the plus 7 at the end will shift up 7 units. So in order to graph, you start with your vertex, which is going to be at 3, 7. And now you need to know your steps. Your traditional steps are 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. And your steps get multiplied by your a value, which is negative 2. So that means your steps will be negative 2, negative 6, negative 10, negative 14, etc. So from the vertex, you always move over 1, and now you're going to move down 2 to get to the next point. You do not have to show these lines if you do not want to. You can just count. Now you're going to move over 1 and down 6. And that's where the next point will be. Lastly, you're going to move over 1 and down 10. So that goes off the grid. That point would be down around here. And it's going to be symmetrical on the same side. So over 1, down 2. Over 1, down 6, over 1, down 10. If it doesn't fit on the grid, you don't have to graph it. And then what you're going to do is to graph your parabola. I'm not very good at graphing parabolas on this tablet, so I'm just going to do my best. Okay, so just make sure it goes through those points. Like I said, I'm not very good at drawing parabolas on the tablet. So your parabola would look like that. So be sure that you can graph parabolas with all the transformations. The next thing you need to be able to do is to state the equation of the parabola if it gives you the vertex and it gives you another point that is on the parabola. So if it gives you the vertex, that means your h value is -8. So when it's x minus h, we have x minus -8. And that double negative becomes x plus 8. Now what you do is you substitute the -1 in for x and the -48 in for y so that we can solve for a. Now use BEDMAS as much as you can. So brackets, -1 plus 8 is 7. Exponents, 7 squared is 49. And you can't do any more BEDMAS because these are not like terms. So now we solve the equation and you're going to subtract 1 from both sides. And now divide both sides by 49. So that means a is equal to -1. So make sure that you put that into the equation. Now you don't need to write the 1, you could just put the negative sign there. It's totally up to you. So that is writing the equation. Next thing to remember to do is how to complete the square. So the first step in completing the square is to factor the -3 from the first two terms. So if you take a -3 out of the first two terms, that leaves you with x squared plus 2x, and the -8 is on the outside. The next step is to take this number here, which is 2, divide it by 2, and square it. So that becomes 1. With that 1, you will add it and subtract it inside the brackets. Now remember, you need this to be your perfect square trinomial so that you can factor it. So we need to get rid of this -1 to the outside of the bracket. To do that, you have to multiply it by the -3. So you get the perfect square trinomial stays inside the brackets. The -1 comes out of the brackets and gets multiplied by the -3 to become +3. Last thing you're going to do is you're going to factor this perfect square trinomial. So the two numbers that multiply to 1 and add to 2 are both 1. And since they're both the same, you just write x plus 1 squared. And 3 minus 8 is -5. So to determine the vertex, our vertex is at -1, -5. Remember that the x-coordinate is the opposite to what it looks like right there. So that is completing the square to find the vertex. To determine the vertex by factoring or averaging the zeros, you first have to factor the expression. So the first type of factoring is common factoring. So that means we can take a -2 out, and you're left with x squared minus 7x minus 18. Now you have a simple trinomial. So what multiplies to -18 and adds to -7? Those two numbers are -9 and positive 2. So that those numbers can go straight into the brackets. So now, the first thing we're going to do is find the zeros. You do that by setting each bracket equal to 0 and solving for x. So add 9 to both sides, subtract 2 from both sides, and those are your two zeros. For the vertex, to find the x-coordinate of the vertex, you're going to average the two zeros, which means you're going to add them up and divide by 2. And to find the y-coordinate of the vertex, you're going to take the x-coordinate of the vertex and substitute it into the equation. And you get 60.5. So that means your vertex is at 3.5, 60.5. Lastly, you'll have a word problem. So what is the maximum height of the ball? So the height of a ball after being hit is described by this. H is the height, T is the time after the ball's been hit. To find the maximum height, that means we want to find the vertex. So you can either average the zeros or you can complete the square. Now, as it turns out, this equation cannot be factored. So one thing that you can do is use the formula to find the zeros and then average the zeros, or you can just complete the square. So take the -5 out of the first two terms. Take this term, divide it by 2, square it. Now add and subtract that term inside the brackets. So that -4 is going to have to come out of the bracket and it's going to have to multiply by -5 because that's what's on the outside of the bracket. So -4 times -5 is 20. Lastly, factor this. What multiplies to +4 adds to -4. Both numbers are -2, so you write it as x minus 2 squared, and 20 plus 1 is 21. This number here is what gives you the maximum height. Question B says how many seconds after impact is the maximum height reached? So that's now asking for the time, which is this value right there. Because the vertex is at 221. So at 2 seconds, the maximum height is 21. Now, on the exam, or on the summative, you might get a question C which says, when does the ball land? So what might happen is you are going to combine a zeros word problem with a vertex word problem all in the same problem. So don't forget that this is from Unit 4, in which case to find the zeros, you could use the formula, which is this quadratic formula right here, and you would use that on this equation, or you could factor that equation if possible. Or lastly, since the equation you have here in vertex form, you could use isolation or SAMDEB. But that will all be reviewed in the Unit 4 video. Thank you.